There we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get back to our agenda item, and we're in board discussion now. We've heard from Supervisor Tofinelli, heard from Supervisor Mills. Any other comments by board members? Whoops. No board member comments.
I'll defer for now.
Okay. Well, I have some comments. Ladies and gentlemen, I've sat on this board for 3 years, and I've had the unique experience to go through all the crises in those 3 years. I've spent time as a patrol deputy and as a deputy in this county, and I got to feel the pulse of the people in this county. But recently I've seen a big wedge drove right through the middle of this county. I've seen people that are friends run to the opposite sides of an issue to the point where they're not even speaking to each other anymore. And that is very serious to me. We have a good county. We've done more than our share of giving, and suffering. And now we have this issue ahead of us, along with others. And if we don't do something about this and put an end to this and go on with our lives, we will be lost. And we can't recover from that. A lot of folks have said some comments about the board members and other people, and I would hope they're not that's not what they really feel, but I have to pay attention to that. This issue has been so convoluted on both sides that I don't think we have the opportunity to really see or even educate ourselves to a solution for this problem. The responsibility of your elected officials up here are to make that decision for you. I disagree with that. My original position has not changed regarding marijuana, but I don't consider that now. As your elected official, that doesn't matter for me. The voice of the people in this county needs to be heard on all sides of this issue. And my position, as I stated 2 meetings ago, which I will tell you right now, is let the people decide. Now, I don't know where my other board members are on this issue. I have not discussed it with them. But we need to end this. We need to go on with our lives, be it whatever it may be, ban, regulation, but we have to put an end to this madness. But we have to be considerate of the other person's position. This is not a sandlot baseball game where you pick and choose sides. The decisions made here are going to affect our lives for a long, long time. It's going to affect our county. And we better think about surviving. And that's exactly what it is. Surviving. They have thrown everything they possibly can at us. We've had the Butte fire. We lost our sheriff in office. We have tree mortality. We have the marijuana issue. And believe me, people are out there looking to see what Calaveras County does. So we need to be very wise in our decisions. And I'm not talking about us 5 folks. the people of Calaveras County need to chime in and vote individually and determine what's going to happen to us. Now, that's my position. I would encourage other board members to state theirs if they haven't already. But that's where I'm at. I know we're not going to make everybody happy. And I know there's been threats, there's been statements, recall, whatever. If it is, so be it. If you think that the people of this county are going to cure this problem by removing your representatives, then let's give you the opportunity to vote that way. But let's not forget what we do here. Let's not forget who we are. Let's not forget we are Calaveras County. I dedicated my life to this county. I've been on that street. I've been involved in law enforcement. I spent 30 years enforcing the law. Now I'm part of that lawmaking process. And boy, I don't want to make a bad law. Because we got good laws and we got bad laws. But which way we go, it has to be the voice of the people. All of the people. Not just a few, not one group, but decide where we're going to go on this path, on this journey. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Any further comments?
I certainly appreciate our chair's passion for the situation. Mr. Maurer, I've read all the comments. It's a long read. But I don't have to, all I get to do is read them. You have to respond to them. I'm sorry. That's the best I can say. That was hours and hours. I'd like to go back to the budget under environmental health, line 4130, permits and grading. In the budget, we received $1,989 in fees during the 2015 budget year, $450 in fees during the 2016 budget year, and anticipating $1,500 in fees this year for grading permits. In line item 4216 penalties, others, we find 1,780 collected in 2015. Zero is so far collected this year, and not expecting to collect any penalties for grading next year. Considering the level of environmental damage from lot clearing, this is something that Supervisor Tofinelli alluded to, earth moving, trees removed, it can be easily seen from the air. These numbers only make sense if we have a large group of residents that just do not comply and have no intention of complying. This speaks to what is our standard operating procedure if you're caught. Well, our current response is to give us an as-built and pull a permit, no matter what the damage has been done to the local environment, to the native creeks and streams, to water sources for communities, for animal habitat. Keep in mind, moving substantial quantities of soil is a permanent scarring of the land. I know if this was any other issue, the environmentalists would be all over it, because this does not seem to include them for some reason. If you were in mining or any other type of business, you would end up going through CEQA, NEPA, endangered species, cultural reviews, all of that on your own. If we had done that with each individual who was grading, I'm not certain we'd be in this situation today. Our grading code should be looked at, and they should have been looked at a long time ago, just like we talked about Section 806 in the nuisance codes and revising those. Well, the grading codes probably will need to be revised as well. But over and over, the issue of full cost recovery has been part of my mantra on the budget, if you've been listening. And thanks, Brian Banner, for stating the problem in your department goes back over 10 years. When people choose to violate laws and rules, there are often severe penalties, and we should make those so that non-compliance is prohibitive. it seems like, except when it comes to this. And why? Asking the state to help us with this damage is yet to be proven that they have the capacity or the willingness to help us. So from this point, just on this one issue, many have decided to simply carry on until they're caught or forced to comply, knowing we've operated this way in the past. So no matter what happens, the cost to enforce any rules currently in place is not being recovered by because what happens is it's placing the burden on our taxpayers. Let's look at our ability to fully understand the costs involved in regulating. Referencing the budget hearings, tape number 2, June 14th of that meeting, beginning at 2 hours, 20 minutes, 52 seconds in. There was a discussion with our auditor on what financial tracking was done. Speaking about departments, they wanted to maintain control in their respective budgets and did not want to give up that control, whether to administration or my office or anyone else. That's Rebecca Callan speaking. So the whole idea of maintaining one central budget for cannabis kind of flew out the window because you have to give up a control, expenditure control, and we don't have a budget for cannabis. And I know just recently that's been fixed, and I thank our CAO for stepping up and taking care of that. But let's continue down this track of understanding budgets, budget performance, and budget control, which is one of a supervisor's 2 primary responsibilities. In the Calaveras County Grand Jury report from last year in finding number 8, it states the Board of Supervisors and department heads lack expertise in the budget process. The county's response was only to disagree in part with finding number 8, admitting new board members and department heads initially lack expertise with the budget process, and further stating they are given a binder that includes the information on the county's budget process. But please keep in mind that there were no new supervisors to the budget process last year. Let's look at this from a process standpoint to clearly demonstrate what our capability to perform under the existing UO has been. Several department heads have been very firm in their understanding and applications of rules surrounding the UO. Where we got into problems is some of the executive decisions where we didn't come back to the board for clarification or confirmation. So on a positive note, the appeals process, the rules stated in the UO are generally followed to the letter. I think for a moment, and somebody had mentioned about the $100 appeal fee. I think we raised that in, February 2016 to $500? And if you realize that we are now over 100 appeals, roughly?
That number sounds pretty close.
Pretty close. So each appeal, though, has to be prepared to an evidentiary standard, as these cases may and have ended up in court. The cost for those cases has far exceeded the appeal fee, and again is being borne directly by our taxpayers. This is planning commission, board of supervisors, environmental health, building, sheriff, legal, and others, where expenses incurred to bring people into compliance is not borne by the offender. It is being paid for by our taxpayers. The result is reduced capacity to serve those taxpayers in other ways, and also results in reduced response to other concerns. And we have no idea what those true costs were, as noted by our auditor. So I'm not saying that is one of the answers, but it just speaks to the larger problem of just exactly what level of control can we have in a regulatory process, because at this point, we seem to be having trouble controlling under the UO. And so I think if the board's going to discuss any kind of regulation and have any cognitive discussion about it, we first of all have to look at our history and our ability and capacity to handle any type of regulation, who would be paying for that regulation, and to what level we would want to do that. And at this point, we've had roughly a year to prove whether or not we could do it. I don't see that we've proven it. And so that's one of the reasons I'm standing firm right now that if we make a statement, let's just stop everything right now. If this board in the future wants to look at some other way of resolving this, fine. But until, and I understand Supervisor Oliveira's point about taking this to the ballot, until such time as we have something that is codified, it would be very difficult to do that. So I think we need to move quickly along that road towards codification if we're going to actually bring it to a ballot at a reasonable time. And I will just hold at that point for now.
Supervisor Mills? Further comments by the board? Staff? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Real quick, Dennis, what do you mean by codification exactly?
Well, that the board actually makes a vote as to what they want. And whatever that statement is, if there's a decision at that point and 3 supervisors can agree to allow whatever that is to go to the ballot, but to just simply say, we're going to embark now on a track of, say, a dual effort here to put a regulate type of ordinance together on top of a ban ordinance and something down that road, I'd have to poll the board as to whether or not they'd even want to track in that direction. I think first thing we need to do is, we've got the staff working towards a ban, and that is the direction that they've been instructed to go. And until we complete that, everything else should basically be set aside.
If this board decides to go to a ballot issue, a model that we could follow, if you will, is to complete a ban ordinance ballot issue, then work on a well-regulated, strict regulation, and put that before the people to vote. The question would be, is there sufficient time to do this for the November ballot?
In order to get a ballot measure on the November, everything would have to be approved by the board by August 1st. So then I think it puts on county council for time.
As the board's aware, when you put an item on a ballot, you have to do an introduction first and then bring it back for adoption and direct staff to place it on, call the election and place the initiative on the ballot. So that's a 2-step process. So if we're looking at an August 1 deadline, we would have to be adopting it at a meeting before August 1st and then introducing it at a meeting before that. That is a very, quite frankly, unrealistic amount of time to draft 2 ordinances, if that's what I'm hearing. Unless it's just the ban initiative, we could certainly do that. If it is to do both, I don't think that's realistic, but if the direction of this board is to bring the draft ban ordinance that's already been drafted forward as an initiative rather than an ordinance that this board just adopts on its own legislative authority, I believe that we would be able to meet those deadlines for placing it on the ballot. Because it is a county-sponsored initiative and not a voter-sponsored initiative, it is still subject to CEQA. So we would still have to go through the process of completing and certifying the EIR, and I don't believe that we would be able to respond and bring the EIR forward for certification within those timeframes.
And further, I think that before we even discuss regulation, we need to know whether or not there's sufficient support on the board to do that, or whether we stay within the framework that was discussed on January 31st.
Supervisor Garamendi, your light's on. You wish to speak?
Yeah, I was, well, my position's been taken out multiple times, so I won't drag everybody through that, but I think this is probably correct. We should probably find out where things are. But as far as the election, I think that we've learned a lot over the last year. I mean, we are almost a full year ahead of most other counties in the state as far as learning what works and what doesn't work. You know, we were the trial balloon, and we've learned a lot. You know, things like, you know, appropriate parcel size, zoning requirements, all these things. And so I'm very concerned about an election that would bind us into a certain regulatory framework, because if we'd gone with D, or we made a permanent ordinance back in May, we wouldn't be able to make adjustments to make it work like we are now. What is voted on is what we've got until the next election. And so I want to, if we head towards regulation, I'd want the ability to adjust with as we learn. This is a new industry. This is coming into regulation. We have to have some flexibility. But we could do something like in June. I imagine the counselor is correct that this would be too short a time. But we could always do an advisory. Government code allows us to do advisory elections. It says, do you like what we're doing or you're not like what we're doing? It's a much more complicated statement than that. But it allows us to find out, well, do people agree with where we've gone, if we've gone with regulation, or do they not? I also have grave concerns about the costs. I think we just spent 3 days last week clearly diagnosing that we don't have any money. And I'd be really hesitant to spend $50,000 to $80,000 on another election at this point. So, we can do it, but maybe not in November, would be my position.
Mr. Mauer. How would you frame an advisory ballot issue? Or can we? Council, you may want to chime in on this. And number two, if the board elects to consider a dual ballot issue, a ban issue and a regulation issue, can that be done by August 1st? I heard council state that it's going to be very, very difficult.
I would agree with council that we probably could not meet the time frame to actually have something adopted and then set before the voters, because we still have to go through the planning commission first before the board can make a formal adoption of the zoning ordinance. So that, at this point in time, given the comment, response to comments and then public hearing process and completion of the findings necessary to take whatever action you decide to take, I just don't see it happening by August 1st. An advisory vote, and we need to work very closely with both the elections official and county council to make sure that it meets all the requirements of advisory vote, possibly could be prepared in time to put something on a November ballot. Now, there isn't, if I may ask Rebecca a question, is there already a election scheduled for November? So it would be a special election. This would probably be the only thing on it. So we would be bearing the full cost of that for this one item. But it may be money well spent to resolve this issue. Do the voters support a ban or do they support regulation? I think you could craft it in a way that would get the answer that you need to get. I'm not sure exactly what that language would be. I wouldn't want to try to come up with something off the cuff right now, but I think that you could probably create an advisory measure that would provide you with the reading of what the public wants for that. But I don't think we could have something that prepared in time to actually vote on specific language of an ordinance, let alone two.
Thank you, sir. Let's talk about a single band initiative, a band ballot. If we place that on an election, if that passes by the vote of the people, how would that affect our operation here? We would lose, depending on how the ballot is written. I understand that. Would we lose all cultivation? Would we lose our collectives? Would we lose any taxes, Measure C? What's the ramifications of that?
Well, it's going to depend on how it's written.
I understand.
And currently, if I remember the details of the present ban ordinance, it would go into effect 30 days after it's voted on by the board, or if it's set for referendum or the board places on the ballot, then upon completion of the vote. The way the urgency ordinance was written is that anyone operating under that ordinance would have 90 days after the effective date to comply. And we have remediation requirements that require those who are, once it's banned, that they have to remediate the property, make sure there's no erosion issues. It doesn't mean restore it to its natural pre-cultivation condition. If grading had occurred, it's not going to go back and regrade it to, go back to the original contours. But it would have to be revegetated, have to make sure there's no erosion, that any kind of structures or improvements or what's the opposite of improvements? Some of the other garbage that we see out there is cleaned up, that it's left in a position, much like we have for reclamation on a mine. It's not going to return it to its original state, but it's going to make it so it's usable for some other purpose in the future and not just abandoned. So that's the whole point of that provision. So there would be some time frame established for those growers who are no longer allowed to continue to grow to stop and to rehabilitate the land and make it usable for some other purpose.
As written, it's 180 days after inaction for the remediation phase, 90 days to comply with not continuing to grow. So, two separate timelines, one for remediation, one for stopping operations.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the exact time frames.
Okay, let's consider if it was put to a vote of the people, a ban initiative, if you will, and it fails, what happens then?
Then we continue to operate under the urgency ordinance until February 14th. And then
Of
we have
2018.
Of 2018, and then we have nothing on the books unless we can adopt something in the meantime. Now, we could utilize the same EIR, I believe, for some other alternative as long as it's within the parameters that we've established with that EIR. So it's possible that if there were an election to ban it, the ban fails, we could be in a position then to hold hearings and adopt some other ordinance. But the time frame then is very narrow to get that done by February. Unless we were to adopt another urgency ordinance that differs from the one that we adopted before. But we have to make new findings, under whatever the circumstances are at the time, and that would be something we'd have to work on very carefully to make sure that it meets all the requirements of the urgency ordinance. We cannot extend the original one, first one. We cannot use those same findings again to extend it beyond the 2 year or the time frame that was established by the board.
Okay, final question. If we defeat the ban initiative and we don't do anything and we reach our February 14th, 2018 deadline, what happens then?
We go back to where we were 15 months ago with no regulation other than the permissive zoning provisions that say in our zoning code you're only allowed to do those things that are listed in our code, in the zones. That is what we've based our statement that you cannot grow except under the, let me rephrase that. Before we adopted the urgency ordinance, we were saying that cultivation of cannabis is illegal because it is not permitted in our zone. That's not a very strong position to be in.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. I hope we've explored some options there. Supervisor Tofinelli.
Getting back to Peter and Megan or Julie, if an initiative gets on the ballot and it's a ban and it gets defeated, we have the ability to take the current ordinance that is being done now, is going to be presented after the EIR comments that are addressed to the Planning Commission and then to this board. We have the ability to add to that regulations to that ordinance. Is that not correct?
That's correct, yes.
And it's a time frame, let me finish the question, and the time frame, depending on what those regulations that this board sets down, could be either a very short period of time or it could be 60 days or so before you get that adjusted to what the majority of the board wants. And then you would make sure that those are within the parameters of the EIR before you then present it to the planning commission, and then it comes to this board with their comments, correct?
Theoretically correct.
And I think.
Never done it before.
In terms of, you know, how much change the board could ask for within the scope of our EIR, because the EIR encompasses a variety of alternatives ranging from strict regulation all the way to a ban, as long as there was no wild card in the recommendations and it was somewhere on that sliding scale of different options that have been studied, as long as it's been studied already, then we should be able to make those adjustments.
So my point is, if this board goes down the path of putting something on the ballot in November and it gets defeated in November, then the time frame before February, we would be pushing it by using the ordinance that we have written now, but we could make it before the urgency ordinance elapses.
Supervisor Tofinelli, I'll answer that question. And speaking with Ms. Turner, November is the only time frame to hold the election before February. So that August 1st deadline would be on us to get an adopted ordinance or initiative to the elections office to be placed on the ballot, whether it was the draft ban that we have already completed or some variation of that. We still have to have CEQA completed. And that is the question, is I don't believe that we would be able to have the entire CEQA process completed by that August 1st deadline to make it on a November ballot. That's my concern, is the timelines and the restrictions and limitations that we have with the elections office and placing something on the ballot for November.
Mr. Maurer, looks like you need to say something about that.
No, I'm just really thinking about what Megan had just said, and
CEQA could not be completed in that time frame.
I don't believe we can.
Okay.
I really don't.
Further questions? Further comments? Hearing none? I guess this meeting is, okay.
I asked this at the end of my last.
My microphone.
Sorry. I asked this at the end of the last meeting. Is there any circumstance under which we want to start discussing regulation? I pull myself, yes.
You're asking for a poll of the board?
I am.
Okay. Supervisor Clapp, do you wish to discuss any type of regulation?
I just think we should go to vote. If we vote for a ban, the other side has a right to bring an issue to the voters at that
Can you
time.
talk into your mic, please, so everybody can hear what you're saying?
I know.
No, my position is I think we've already pulled the board enough times. I think everyone knows pretty well what the position is. For us to, I'm against for us putting an initiative out for the people. I don't think initiatives are good. I think Prop C was a disaster. We're locked into something. I don't think we should be locking, because I don't think we'll be here in 15 years or 5 years, and I don't want to lock the next board coming behind us to then be locked into a decision that we made. You know, so if we make the decision, if they don't like the decision, they can vote me out, put someone in and change the decision. Prop C is we're stuck with, we can't change it, has the fees structure already in. I think they're way too low. And pulling the board again, I don't see the point. I mean, I think that we should just make our vote when it comes up, and if the ban wins, then I think the other party can get an initiative on the ballot themselves.
Supervisor Mills?
Staff has been working since January to follow board's direction. And I appreciate the effort that they've put into what they've done. It has not been easy. For us to suddenly do any kind of course corrections to that right now, I think hamstrings the staff and will create some complications that may not be easily overcome. We put this together and we don't put it on the ballot, this board and future boards will have some ability to modify or to make structural changes as the need arises. Folks, if you put this on the ballot, it's locked. There won't be any other changes except to go back to the ballot again. And so with the fluid nature of what's going on in Sacramento, that's not helping us. And we need to be able to have some fluidity in our discussion and not to be locked down by an initiative to say it's off the table. You can't do anything about it. And so that's a grave fear. I would just like us to continue on the track we're on, get this done. If those that want to regulate feel that they have a good plan in place and they want to bring it before the voters and they can sell it, so be it. But knowing what I know about what we've got to this point, I think the board's direction's been clear. I don't see that it's changed, and I hope that it won't. We get this done.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Tofinelli?
Well, again, my stance was nothing in residential zoning, which includes anything that has an R in it, RR, R1, R5, R10, R20. And I made that clear today. Going down the path of the ban, when we voted the ban in, the ban was a starting point. We got to stop somewhere. We got to stop this madness. I'm still in favor of stopping the madness till we get a grasp on it. I do have a couple other questions, and it has to do with county council and not stopping the process as we're going forward. I know there's frustration on this board on both sides of this issue, and some of the frustration on the one side has been the length of time, because I'm sure they've heard it from their constituents, and we've heard it many times here in the boardroom about why isn't it done going forward. So I understand not putting any more pressure on staff or anything to delay anything going forward in the position on that. But my question to Megan or Julie, representing county council, would be if there was discussions today on adding specific items to this ordinance, such as 600 acres, anything smaller than 600 acres or 100 acres, what have you, or having a CUP attached to it if we agreed to some type of acreage or something. If we added things in today, would we be able to add that into the context of the ordinance and have it prepared in time for the AIR when it's finished and presented?
A lot of it depends on exactly what the direction is. If it's something simple like we just want to increase setbacks, that would be a relatively small impact. I mean, the writing of the change in the ordinance would be very quick. I would analyze to see whether our findings are still accurate. But if there's something that requires more legal research or more justification, then it could take a lot longer. It's very content dependent. Most of the time, something like we want to increase acreage, if we're going to reduce impacts by not having it in residential areas, I'd have to talk with Peter about the comments we received and whether we'd have to address them somewhat differently from a CEQA perspective based on how that might impact traffic, et cetera. But I don't, so I'll let Peter speak to the EIR process. But as far as the drafting, it all depends on how specific.
How much specific
and how much
complex.
that would impact findings that we've made. So small adjustments that are technical, like distance and height and what have you, are very easy to make quickly. If there are major changes in terms of switching directions from what we have already prepared, it could take a little bit longer.
I would just add that as long as the direction is abundantly clear to staff exactly what it is that you would like to see, I think that staff could modify it to address that direction in a similar time frame of what planning will be working under with responding to the EIR comments. I do think that as far as modifying because we have a multitude of versions of ordinances dating back to many years ago that we can pull from. I do think that as long as the direction is clear, we can make those changes fairly quickly and within the same timeframes as Peter's been working on or will be working on with responding to the EIR comments.
And just one other comment is that when we drafted the regulatory ordinance that's the subject of the EIR, that was prior to some significant changes in state law, especially adult use of marijuana act. So there will have to be some adjustments to a regulatory ordinance to bring it current. The ban ordinance was done after Alma passed, and so it addresses the state law minimum requirements. So we will have to make some adjustments for state law compliance to a regulatory ordinance.
And I would agree with council on that. You know, as long as you can articulate what it is you are trying to accomplish by adding a minimum parcel size or change in zoning or any other standards, you can say this addresses noise or this addresses smell or traffic, then I think it would be very easy to incorporate that and the findings into the final action as well as the drafting of the standards themselves. So as far as how it fits in with the EIR process, if we were to go to a more strict regulatory ordinance, that could fit into the EIR as it is prepared today and as we continue to work on it. Unless it's something that's totally out of anything that we've looked at under the EIR, and I can't think of anything that hasn't been and that we would conceivably put into an ordinance to address the impacts that we're trying to address. It would all fit in the context of the EIR that we have already.
I have another question for Peter. Peter, do you know by chance how many indoor grows are permitted right now?
Off the top of my head, I do not know.
5, 3, 6, 10, 12, 100?
I would say it's probably between 5 and 15.
And the sizes of them, they vary?
They vary. Most of the indoor cultivation sites are quite a bit smaller than the outdoor. The average outdoor cultivation was about 15,000 square feet. And I would guess that the average indoor cultivation is probably around 5,000 square feet.
Are they located in any specific zones?
Most of them are in industrial zones, if I recall correctly. We have a lot of mixed use in the rural ag zones, mixed light, where we've got part indoor, part outdoor operation, where they start indoors and they move them outdoors. But a complete indoor operation is primarily in the commercial industrial areas.
So if you drove past them, you wouldn't even know what was going on inside the building? If it's an industrial type building?
The one that I've been to, I would not have known it was there.
Okay. All right. That's a fair enough statement. Thank you.
Supervisor Tofinelli, on the poll,
On the poll,
what's your position?
I'm in favor at this point, finding that if we do any modifications to this at this point, then it's going to delay the progress, and I would love to get this thing done and settled as soon as possible. So perhaps as things come forward, we can maybe readdress some of these things. I think if all the supervisors are open to that, I see Supervisor Mills shaking his head yes. So I think the imperative thing is right now is to continue moving forward and see what Mr. Maurer has in his time frame as we go forward. Perhaps he can report back to us on the 27th how close he is to addressing the comments on the EIR and keep us posted on that, and whether there's any objections or that have substantial standing in it that we need to readdress, so we know going forward, we have some idea in our mind when it's actually going to get to the Planning Commission. And then I have some questions that I would like to meet with you in your office on.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, and I can provide like a weekly update just to see where we're at, keep things going. I guess there's one other thing that we might just want to keep in mind. There is state legislation going through right now that would provide a CEQA exemption. Apparently it's passed both houses and is sitting on the governor's desk for signature that provides exemption under CEQA for an ordinance, any local ordinance that requires discretionary review of all cannabis-related activity. And if that passes, if that gets signed, that would change things dramatically as far as what we have to do. It hasn't been signed yet, we don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just learned about it today, so.
I would just add to that, Mr. Mauer's referring to SB 94. That was something that was, it was just passed, it was read for the third time and passed on to the Senate on the 15th, so that was last Thursday. It has not been signed, so it is not currently in law. But one of the things with that is it does provide a CEQA exemption for regulatory programs as long as the regulatory program is providing for discretionary permits. In essence, the CEQA analysis would happen on the tail end, not on the front end, on a programmatic level. So essentially all of the potentially any CUP or basically any operation would be required to get some form of a discretionary permit, whether it be a CUP or other permit that would require a CEQA analysis of that one project. So essentially, rather than doing a ministerial permit, which is what the registration process is, it would be a discretionary permit process, which each and every individual application would have to undergo a CEQA analysis. So.
You want to speak, Supervisor Garamendi?
Are you done? Yeah, being as that as it is, I will withdraw my poll at this point. You know, I mean, I'm not sure what we just spent 2 days doing, and we asked lots of people to submit lots of ideas. There's a lot of compromise in the room. I'm honestly disappointed that we were unable to really consider that, considering that, you know, the industry group itself sat forward and said, we will reduce the amount of, you know, we are looking at 250 grows, which would reduce, and that would fund the sheriff's department for the eradication of the illegal grows. That's a 4/5 reduction in the amount of total grows estimated going on in our district. You know, we just spent last week doing the budget, so everybody here is very familiar with the budget and the cliff that we're about to drive off. And I'm sorry that we were unable to convince people that perhaps there's a middle ground. That's all I've got.
Thank you. So the poll's been withdrawn? So there's no need to further discuss this? It's my understanding that we will wait till the EIR comes before the board for discussion, and we'll resume at that time. Is that correct?
And I will provide regular updates of where we're at, and if anything new happens, we will certainly advise you of that.
Okay. Council, could you make sure that we follow this bill that's on the governor's desk along with Mr. Mauer? I just heard about that just now, and I'm kind of interested in where that's going to go. Is there anything else? Any comments by staff?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, go ahead, Supervisor.
I do have another question. It has with county council. I had a couple conversations with you, Megan, and I'm not sure if I had any with you, Julie, regarding the urgency ordinance and the verbiage in it as to if we have any regulations at all, no matter what they may be, that we can continue with the funding that's available from the registrations, and we could have registrations for those regulations. Is that correct?
Well, I just want to clarify, a permanent ordinance would be replacing the urgency ordinance. So whatever the permanent ordinance looks like. So if there is, in essence, a ban or a very highly regulated regulatory program, that would be replacing the urgency ordinance. And if it were, my recollection of what we discussed was that it would be an ordinance that had some level of regulation, not a complete ban across the board, and whether that would allow for continued registration fees and the Measure C tax monies. Is that, am I understanding what your question?
Correct.
Okay. So in that situation, that ordinance, we would be putting forward a permanent fee rather than the urgency ordinance fee, and we would be collecting new fees for that regulatory program. And yes, we would continue to use the funds that because it's been an ongoing program. And so whether it's more tightly restricted, it's still a program that we are implementing. We've been implementing this for over a year, and it would be a continuation of some version of that. If it goes to a complete ban, then obviously we cannot collect new fees, and we would be looking at what amount of fees, if any, we still had at the time that permanent ordinance was adopted and actually implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to that point then, under Prop 64, there is still an ability of the county to have some form of regulation. And the regulation or the recovery of fees would be for us to provide inspections to ensure that Prop 64 is being complied with. Whether that be odor control or mold, or, is it truly 6 plants? Is it truly indoors? What all that isn't even in this mix right now, but at some point, that is something we may direct staff in the future to develop some type of a regulatory program and some fee structure to take care of it, so it does have a cost recovery component. If our decision would be that we're going to take Prop 64 and move 6 plants outdoors, all that is still, as long as it stays in front of the board, we're the ones that can have that discussion. If we push this out to the voters, the discussion stops. And that's why I want to be very careful that we spend the time crafting what we want this to be before we even bring a voter initiative into it and have any kind of discussion about it. So there's an opportunity to continue that discussion here and be sure that you gain 3 consensus votes to go in that direction as part of that process.
And I just, as I've previously said in prior meetings, and I think this is what Supervisor Tofinelli was also getting at, is whether the Measure C taxes would actually be able to be collected or not. Obviously, if there is a ban, if there's no commercial industry, whether that be cultivation, dispensaries, manufacturing, delivery, whatever that commercial industry is, there's no Measure C taxes. But if there is some level of commercial industry, then Measure C taxes would be collectible.
I wasn't even speaking to Measure C. I was just speaking to the fact of the board will still have to have or could have some discussions surrounding Prop 64, surrounding how that all fits into this. And if there is any kind of oversight, that there can be a fee for service collected. So I just wanted to be sure that that still is on the table. That is still something that we can discuss.
I want to just say that I think we ought to be very cautious about trying to play games and manipulate our positions so that we could try to tap into Prop 64 dollars. I think we're going to have plenty of legal problems. We don't need legal problems with the state of California by trying to be cute or game the system. Well, you can't be a little bit pregnant. We either are or we aren't. So I just want everybody to let's not get too clever. If we want to regulate, let's regulate. But let's not say we're regulating when we're not, because that is a ban, and that'll be proven up the street. So let's just be cautious when we have that conversation.
Further comments? I have one concern. How are we going to make this county safe? How are we going to enforce it? Be it ban, be it regulation, how are we going to enforce that? We're going to have to think about that, aren't we? Especially seeing our budget deficit. Don't have any hats, don't have any rabbits. We're down to hard facts, folks. Sheriff? Would you approach, please?
The only comment I'd like to make is on Dennis Mills to clarify Prop 64. Because that is a state law for personal use, there are no fees that you can attach to that, period.
So Sheriff, what happens if we go total ban? How does that affect our enforcement capabilities? And how many people are going to be getting pink slips from your office?
Well, like I said before, the pink slips depend on what you folks decide to do, whether you decide to keep the urgency or if you decide to keep the program going. My position isn't going to change. I'm still going to continue to do what we're doing, which is go after the growers. Whether it slows me down or not, or whether it stops me, falls back upon you folks. If I don't have the personnel, it's going to make it difficult, that I will say. But it's not going to stop us. We will continue moving in a forward direction. It's just how fast forward you want to go.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Thank you, Sheriff. Further comments by the board? Further comments by staff?
I'll ask the building department, how much does it cost me?
Supervisor Clapp, could you talk into the microphone for us?
How much does it cost me to get a permit for a hot water heater in my house that I already have? Or to get a re-roof permit on my house?
I'd have to look at the currently adopted fee schedule.
But I do pay a fee on both those, do I not?
You don't pay a fee for a water heater that you already have, no.
Oh, really?
If
How
you're
come-
replacing the water heater you already
Yeah,
have.
that's what I'm
you pay.
talking about, replacing my hot water heater.
I know. I got you.
I'll hear your point of order. Who declared a point of order? Okay,
Any other questions?
thank you. You can answer that question, I believe, sir.
On the water heater?
Yeah, I have an existing house and my hot water heater goes out, or my roof goes bad.
Right.
I have to obtain a permit to get that hot water heater fixed, and I have to obtain a
For a
permit to
change
get.
out, yeah, it's a minimum fee.
Yes,
Just to
And
go out,
this-
just to make sure it's safe, that's all.
yes, and same with my roof, to make sure it's safe.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sure we had a reason for that. Is there any other comments by staff? Okay. Madam Clerk?
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, this is the time for board members to report on meetings attended on behalf of the county and to carry out their duties as county supervisor.
Would you like to start, Supervisor Tofinelli?
We met with the sheriff yesterday for about 2 hours going over budgets. And as reported out by Supervisor Mills and the CAO, we haven't came to full resolution with that yet. Hopefully by the 27th, when the CAO comes back to us and we adopt the preliminary budget, all of that will be hashed out or ironed out. I have a cash flow analysis and invoice schedule meeting tomorrow at 1:30 here at Government Center with CAO Jeff Krovitz and P&J. I also have a CMCAA meeting scheduled at 8:30 a.m. in Mariposa. You're laughing? That's scheduled for the 22nd, which is Thursday. And then on the 26th, I have a JPA board meeting, which is the, well, actually, it's a teleconference meeting from Sonora, which is the children's, what is that committee, Dennis? That is the Sierra Central Child Support Agency. Right. Yeah, so that's all I have to report.
Supervisor Garamendi?
I will be going to the RCRC board meeting tomorrow and the Golden State Finance Authority meetings. Board meeting is in Sacramento. I will be spending a lot of time trying to figure out how we try to keep our community safe and our services going with no money over the next couple of days.
Supervisor Clapp?
I had a barbecue at Hogan's for Father's Day, and there was over 130 people showed up, even in the hot heat.
Wow, where was my invitation?
Well, I ended up having 20 people from Gary's district come over, so I'm going to send him a bill for those 20 people. He assured me he's going to pay me.
Thank you for feeding my constituents.
I look out for him. I have to cover you now. And I had my road committee and stuff, met with them, and that's about it. It was hot.
Supervisor Mills?
Yeah, last night in Jackson, I spoke with Rocky Deal and others in Congressman McClintock's office about particularly Spicer Reservoir Road and some of the issues with the U.S. Forest Service. He was on a conference call with them yesterday afternoon wanting to expedite. And so I have put before a request to bring forth an agenda item as a letter of support to the congressman to that is our tourist area. We need those reservoir roads open so we can make use of them. If not for that, for safety for fires, there's many of those roads, as you know, they're still under snow, and they don't have any idea. So it's either that or we just sit back and wait for them to possibly get it done in 2018. That's not going to work. The other thing is I will be testifying at the request of the California Special District Association in Sacramento on Thursday with the Little Hoover Commission on the value and the benefits that special districts bring to counties. And I'm very much looking forward to that opportunity to speak on their behalf, and also being on LAFCO and some of the things of how that plays in as to the financial capabilities as well as the structural capabilities that they provide us. Because think of, if those special districts weren't working, who'd be doing that job? Who'd be overseeing that work? It'd be right here. And I'm not so certain as that's really a smart thing to do in terms of our focus. We have enough to focus on. So that's all I have for now.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Mills. I have just one meeting. I attended last night. I was also scheduled to meet with Congressman McClintock, but I was diverted to White Pines Park Committee meeting, and I'm going to leave with just a surprisingly good note, but I'm not going to take the thunder away from Jeff Krovis, who was very instrumental in making some leaps and bounds in that project over the last 48 hours. It's good things, and I'm going to let him report that out at our next board meeting when he brings an agendized item up. With that, staff?
Mr. Chair, you're not going to report where you were Saturday and Sunday night? Were you?
I made bail and I got out, okay? No. I actually, I did go to a concert, and with Supervisor Tofinelli happens to be there. And I just realized how old I was with John Cougar Mellencamp. But it was a good time. Took a little R&R, folks. Thanks, Gary. I owe you one.
You're welcome, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll conclude the meeting.